The Department of Correctional Services says it will leave no stone unturned to book those involved in the theft of a camera as well as an SD card containing images of the former President Jacob Zuma being admitted at the correctional facility. The Department of Correctional Services spokesperson Singabakho Nxumalo says an internal investigation has revealed that the SD card may have clandestinely been shared with a known broadcaster. Some of the images have been making rounds on social media. Former President Jacob Zuma is currently serving a 15-month sentence at the Escort prison after the Court found him to be in contempt of court. Nxumalo says a criminal case has been opened.
A criminal case has been opened after a camera SD card containing images of the former president, Mr. Jacob Zuma, being admitted at a correctional facility was stolen. It has come to the attention of DCS that these images were stolen from a camera of the official assigned to take photos for institutional filing purposes. The SD card was removed from the camera and it contained highly sensitive images, and this matter is being investigated by both SAPS and the DCS, and the official involved has been contemplated with a suspension notice. We are appalled by the distribution of these images on social media, and we urge people to refrain from sharing them. DCS condemns in strongest possible terms such action and will leave no stone unturned in bringing to book those behind it.
And now we turn our focus to the human rights surrounding the incarceration of the former president. For more on this, also in respect to the rule of law and the protection of human rights, we are talking tonight to the Southern African Director with the Africa Division at Human Rights Watch, Dewa Mavinga, and the Executive Director of Amnesty International South Africa, Shanila Mohammed. You're a part of the conversation tonight on WhatsApp, and with your questions and comments, 072-110-5584, or otherwise you can tweet us at Newzroom 405. Dewa and Shanila, good evening, and thank you very much for your time. All right, let's begin with you, Dewa. I mean, if we look at Section 36(1) of the Constitution of South Africa, the general requirement for the limitation of any right is that it may be limited only in terms of a law of general application, to the extent that the limitation is reasonable, justifiable, and based on human dignity and equality and freedom. Looking at the processes that were followed, particularly to the incarceration of the former president, looking also closely at the judgment, do you think this part of our constitution was strictly adhered to?
Yes, indeed. The idea that the former president has been incarcerated is a reflection of the strength of the and the independence of the courts in South Africa, particularly the judiciary asserting its authority. You will recall that former President Jacob Zuma had defied the Constitutional Court and had refused to appear before the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, despite an order from the Constitutional Court to do so. So there was, in a way, compliance with the law, and it was respectful of the human rights framework set out in the Constitution of South Africa. But as we are aware that former President Jacob Zuma has challenged some of these aspects in court, at the High Court in Pietermaritzburg, as well as the Constitutional Court itself, it will be up to the courts to review and check if perhaps there has been any oversight that could have been undertaken. But broadly, there has been a reaffirmation of the rule of law and respect for the courts in South Africa.
Yeah. There are some who would say, well, we would expect the Human Rights Watch, as defenders of the rights of the people worldwide, to have, for example, spoken out on the fact that a 79-year-old pensioner, if you will, has been sent to prison for just mere contempt, something that many are saying, well, was actually not necessary. There would have been a less restrictive way to get the president to get the message that he is in contempt of court.
Well, if you read closely the Constitutional Court judgment on the matter, it was quite clear that there was serious consideration on the need to ensure accountability, to prevent impunity, And also, given the stature of former President Jacob Zuma and the political support that he wields across South Africa, this was a particularly high-profile issue that had to be addressed directly by the Constitutional Court. And so it is within the mandate of the Constitutional Court to ensure that its orders are respected and that there is respect for its processes. And the lack of interference with the independence of the judiciary was quite welcome, especially if you also look at the comments and statements by the governing ANC party about the need to respect the constitution, to respect democracy, and as the founding values of South Africa's freedoms and democracy. So that is quite a welcome development. And if there are any concerns regarding, specifics about the rights of former President Zuma, then these will also be addressed by the courts, as we know that there are 2 pending cases in the courts at the moment.
Shanila, did the courts and I suppose the state and all those who are looking into this matter manage to balance the fundamental rights of the individual, but other rights and interests, particularly in society, in the best possible way?
Well, I think, Thabo, if you look at how the whole thing unfolded, I mean, I feel, in our view, the final judgment that came out of the Constitutional Court took into account a number of factors that led up to the Court being involved, and one of these was the fact that former President Jacob Zuma did not take advantage or follow proper process in trying to first of all get Justice Zondo to recluse himself, but also around his own case where he was demanding justice and felt that he didn't have a fair shot at it. And actually the problem was to some extent the way in which he handled his own case. So, for example, the way in which they behaved at the Zondo Commission, I mean, that was a clear contempt, leaving the commission without permission. And I think that when we got to the Constitutional Court judgment, they had to weigh all these factors that led up to that judgment, because really it's also about the respect for the courts, respect for the rule of law, and whether or not the person in question is going to respect what the Constitutional Court gave out. And I think the fact that they gave out such a harsh judgment for a contempt case was reflective of what they thought of whether President Jacob Zuma was going to respect it or not. And in our view, we felt that, my analysis is that the Concord felt that, a slap on the wrist was not going to work. It was going to continue, he was going to continue to defy, and there had to be a stronger message sent out, and that stronger message was incarceration. And I think, unfortunately, to some extent, former President Zuma sort of brought himself to that situation, because if you'll recall, Thabo, the Constitutional Court also reached out to him before making that incarceration judgment and asked what he thought his penalty should be, and even then there was defiance. So, to some extent, they are responsible, or he and his legal team are responsible for what happened.
Yeah. Other questions to be asked, and certainly some in the leadership of the ANC, including, I heard earlier on, the Premier bringing up this question of whether or not there are questions to be asked, and I suppose the courts will answer those questions, whether or not the Constitutional Court, being the court of last resort in this particular matter, it was appropriate for it to be the court of first resort. It accepted this particular issue, it dealt with this particular issue, and it issued a verdict on this particular issue and left the former president with no space for an appeal.
Well, I think, Thabo, the challenge was that, the former president, so the Constitutional Court is really the last base in our constitutional democracy. And, it was, and Justice Sisi Kampepe said, even in the judgment, that this was a very, very unusual circumstance. I mean, it was the first time that the Constitutional Court had to face such a case. And I think, it has now set precedents. And really, it all again goes to the behavior of President Zuma with regards to the other courts, and the constant using the other courts in order to try to delay. And to some extent, Justice Zondo, who brought the case before the Constitutional Court, felt that this was the only place where there would be some sort of final arbitration on this issue, because there was constant ways of delaying, various cases being put forward. And we saw even after, the Constitutional Court agreed to hear President Zuma's application for rescission of the judgment, they still went to the High Court, which, there were a lot of jurisdiction issues around there. So this constant yo-yoing between courts really resulted, in my view, in the Constitutional Court being brought in and having to make the final decision. Otherwise, Thabo, the reality is we would have been moving from court to court to court, which has been the modus operandi of President Zuma and his team for the past decade.
Right, let's stay on with that conversation. The Southern African Director of the Africa Division of Human Rights Watch, Deo Mabinga, with us, and the Executive Director of Amnesty International South Africa, Shanila Mohammed. Let's hear your views tonight on 072-110-5584, or you can tweet us tonight at Newzroom 405. We'll continue in a moment. Welcome back live with us now here on Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. You're in focus. Conversation continues tonight with the Southern African Director with the Africa Division of Human Rights Watch, Deo Mabinga, as well as the Executive Director of Amnesty International South Africa, Shanila Mohammed. And we're taking your views and your thoughts tonight also on Twitter at Newzroom 405, on WhatsApp 072-110-5584. Shanila, I'm going to come back to you again. So you say the courts had to go for the harshest possible sentence to send a strong message here. In recognition of proportionality in our approach to a limitation of rights, do you think this was the correct amount, I suppose, of proportionality that was recognized here and considered, considering the age, the health of the former president, and I suppose how that will play out in society?
Well, I think, Thabo, one thing we have to remember is the former president swore not once but twice to uphold the Constitution. And in that regard, he had probably a lot more responsibility and, accountability to uphold the Constitution than your average citizen would, because, he was the president of this country and really was involved very closely in the liberation of this country and in the Constitution. Now, Does that mean that the court should apply a harsher sentence? Well, I think the court took in a number of factors, and one of them was the fact that President Zuma was continuously trying to slip through the loopholes and the legal loopholes, etc. And as I said before, we may think it's a harsh sentence, and probably for a contempt case it is. But at the end of the day, it was really about being very clear that nobody is above the law, and that there is that everyone is subject to the rules of the Constitution and upholding of the law in this country. And I think all those factors played into the decision that was taken by the Constitutional Court. Now, the fact that President Zuma is 79 years old, I mean, to be fair, I mean, I don't mean to sound heartless, Thabo, but everyone is equal with regards to the law. And of course, for somebody who is that age, there are certain dignities and certain ways in which he will be treated in court, in the same way that any other 79-year-old will be treated. But we cannot expect the Constitutional Court, or any court for that matter, to be lenient because of a person's age and because of the fact that they were a former president. And I think that the message that was being sent quite loudly and clearly by the Constitutional Court is that no one, no matter who you are, is above the law. And that was just in response to a number of actions that President Zuma and his team had been conducting. And even on Sunday, ahead of the handing over and the arrest, we saw a very defiant President Zuma and a very defiant team around him. So there was a need to reiterate that that no one is above the law, and no one can escape once they are sentenced to a jail term or some sort of penalty within the law.
So, Shanila, they were alluding to the fact that, of course, he will be treated like any other 79-year-old would be treated behind bars. Now, many, of course, have been talking about this particular limitation and the purpose of this particular limitation. And we know that this particular limitation comes also with the limiting, or even in some instances, the removal of certain human rights of an individual when they are behind bars. So what are the rights that would be afforded the former president as a former head of state, or whether does it actually make any difference?
Well, while in prison, President Zuma will have certain clear rights that are in the Bill of Rights of the Constitution of South Africa, including the right to equality, to dignity, to exercise, and also, given his age, he will have the right to adequate medical treatment, like any other prisoner, and also to even receive medical treatment from doctors of his choice at his own cost, and to adequate nutrition, and to broadly be treated with dignity. And this is why there is huge concern about the violation of his privacy rights when those images were leaked out and went viral on social media. So there is need for the authorities, for the correctional services still to be respectful of the rights of former President Zuma while he is in custody. And there are a number of considerations that are put and that come into play when a prisoner has special needs or conditions, possibly medical conditions, or age, as you have mentioned, that he's a 79-year-old pensioner. And also even behavior while in custody can be influential to other considerations, including early release from prison, for example, parole or correctional supervision, or other forms of support that may be available to prisoners on the basis of equality. So there is no suggestion that former President Zuma would receive any special treatment, but that as a prisoner, he has got guaranteed rights that are available to all other prisoners.
Yeah, there are those, of course, with the view and the fear that because of his status, he will be receiving some kind of special treatment. The minister, though, saying that he will be treated with the inherent dignity that I suppose all human beings are supposed to be treated with. Of course, it's the first time that a Minister of Correctional Services would speak on the conditions of imprisonment of a prisoner. Maybe I've never heard him do that. Maybe it's not the first time. But certainly that almost putting weight behind the type of the prisoner who is behind bars, does it not?
Well, it does, but I think the big message, and as Shanila has said, is that no one is above the law, even if the person is a former president of or a former head of state. We saw that with the imminent and eventual imprisonment that has happened. So that's a big statement that must become the context for this discussion. So perceptions or speculation about preferential treatment will be there, but the act of incarceration of former President Zuma is a clear message that there is equality at law, and it has been exercised, and there is expectation that it will continue to be exercised, although we need to accept that there are continuing legal processes that will be heard by the Constitutional Court and by the High Court of Pietermaritzburg. So these will play out, and it will depend on the outcomes of those processes. And of course, like any other prisoner, former President Zuma is entitled to make applications through his lawyers in terms of conditions of incarceration, in terms of access to medical treatment, in terms of his dignity while he is in prison. So we should not expect that the sentence would be especially harsher because he still remains a prisoner with full rights.
Now, as far as the guidelines are concerned that protect the former president, as far as those pictures are concerned that have now made the rounds, I mean, was the correctional services in the first place entitled to take those photographs for their filing, as they are saying?
What we know is that there are, processes that the correctional services is entitled to undertake with regards to all prisoners in terms of records, in terms of medical records, in terms of identity and security issues. But clearly, and to their credit, they have accepted that there has been a violation and a breach of conditions as well as of the rights of former President Zuma, and that action will be taken with regards to that theft and that breach of protocol, as it were, in terms of how those pictures have been leaked and have gone viral on social media. So it is important that we acknowledge that it is a breach and that this was not the intended purpose of getting those pictures, but within the protocols and policies of the Department of Correctional Services, it would be within its rights in handling prisoners to go through those motions in terms of support, in terms of screening, and in terms of receiving new prisoners.
The conversation continues with the Southern African Director with the Africa Division of Human Rights Watch, Del Mavinga, and Executive Director of Amnesty International South Africa, Shanila Mohammed. Now, Shanila, let's look at the other stories that are developing, particularly around the arrest of former President Jacob Zuma. We heard earlier on, and that story is developing, that the suspended ANC member and spokesperson of MKMVA has been arrested as well for convening a gathering during a time of level 4 of the lockdown. There are some who are saying, well, these are acts of a police state, and South Africa is going into that particular space. There will be a lot of people who will be wanting to voice and air their dissatisfaction with the arrest of former President Jacob Zuma. How do we navigate that space in a manner that does not violate the rights of South Africans who want to do so?
South Africa's constitution is clear. Everyone has the right to free expression. There's no, you can say what you want, you can express how you feel. And I think that is the amazing strength of our constitutional democracy. So people are entitled to say what they think and, how they feel the whole episode played out. But if we were to look at the actual facts and the legality of it, the truth of the matter is that the police were actually very, very lenient and to some extent did give President Jacob Zuma and his entourage a lot more leeway than they actually should have. And of course, if you listen to the police, they say that, it was done in the interest of do no harm, that, even when people were blatantly in violation of curfew, in violation of the COVID regulations, the police did not take action. And, their argument there was that, they held themselves back because they did not want things to deteriorate and, members of the public to be hurt in any form or way. So we saw on Sunday there was a total violation of the law and COVID regulations, and the police took no action. And of course, the people of South Africa, many of them spoke out and really challenged that. And today we saw the police now coming and clamping down, and we saw the first of those people to be arrested was Carl Niehaus. And of course, the police have said that even on Sunday they took video footage of people who were there, and they will be taking action. So, again, it's not about this being a police state. There are regulations that have been set down because of the situation we are in, which is COVID-19, and we saw very blatant violation of those regulations. And of course, the police needed to step in. And to some extent, there was special treatment or preferential treatment given to President Zuma and his group, which probably would not have been given to any ordinary person living in South Africa. So, I feel like, the argument that this is now becoming a police state is not valid. The police were basically following the letter of the law, which was violation of COVID regulations results in arrest or in, some other form of penalty.
Yeah, but Deo, I suppose having assessed these situations and investigated them broadly on the continent, this is the space where politics and the rule of law will collide, and certainly we would expect this, especially seeing that we are in this uncharted space where a former head of state who has massive support still in the country has been arrested.
Absolutely right, Tabo, and there were serious concerns actually that perhaps the situation could escalate and deteriorate and lead to violence, given the brinksmanship of former President Zuma's supporters as they vowed to prevent his arrest, to form a human shield and to cause violence. So I think to his credit, former President Zuma eventually, after a tense standoff, his foundation eventually said that on Twitter that President Zuma had decided to comply with the incarceration order and was on his way to hand himself over to a correctional services facility. This was important because it meant that it took away the real risk of violence that could have happened if they had continued to defy the police and the Constitutional Court and to declare that former President Zuma was not going to go to jail. So we need to acknowledge that, but certainly it's unprecedented on the continent in South Africa to have a former president be committed to prison. And in this particular case, there were also concerns, if you look back at how the police had handled, for example, serious protests like the Marikana situation. There was that concern that there could be bloodshed. But the police should be commended for exercising restraint and for ensuring that there was a peaceful process of holding former President Zuma accountable in a way that, confirms that South Africa has this robust democracy and independent judiciary, and that, of course, the underlying message that no one is above the law, and that although there are serious concerns about the politics and the propaganda and the populism, there is always a way for the institutions to ensure that justice is served without bloodshed.
Right. The initial deadline, Shamila, was on Sunday. Of course, the president did not meet that. This deadline yesterday was actually for the police minister to act. Eventually, the president and the statement saying, no, he made the decision to hand himself over to the authorities. How do you analyze that particular move by the president?
Well, I think, the Constitutional Court judgment was clear. I mean, that, the president had up to Sunday to hand himself over, failing which the police minister and the commissioner of police were instructed to arrest him or to do what was required to take him to, a place of incarceration. And I think what we saw, and again, it could be around some, the way Diwa has mentioned, the police wanted to handle it in a way that caused the least amount of bloodshed, and there was a danger that it could escalate. However, if you look at it within the letter of the law, the fact that Minister Becky Taylor was asking for clarity from the Constitutional Court was really also showing us that, the reluctance to some extent from the police to actually take action. And, eventually, even the fact that they wrote a letter to the Constitutional Court, which is really, unprecedented. I mean, the Constitutional Court direction was very clear, but for some reason, the police minister was struggling to accept that and wanted further direction. And, this writing a letter has no standing in court. I mean, you have to file an application. A letter does not have any standing. And so once again, we saw continuous postponement until eventually, we had a situation which at the very last minute, like 20 to midnight, we had the president hand himself over. And, I would believe, Thabo, that this came as a result of quite a lot of negotiation, quite a lot of agreements before the president handed himself over. And of course, we've seen reports that, even, he was given an ultimatum that if he didn't hand himself over, then the police would be forced to come there, and, he would rather do it with his own protection unit. So, at the end of the day, it was more a sort of a negotiated, coerced handing over rather than a genuine wanting to hand over and surrender yourself to the rule of law, because they held out until the last moment, and we had a reluctant police minister who really struggled to adhere to the Constitutional Court's clear direction.
Yeah. Should we be concerned about that, particularly in the context of our institutions undergoing a reform? I tell you what, we also spoke to the spokesperson of the Jacob Zuma Foundation last night, Mzwanele Manyo, who said they were in talks with decision makers at a higher level around this particular process and how it was going to be approached. The fact that there was this kind of back and forth and coercing that was going on, is it a concern at all?
Well, I think, Thabo, we can't deny that there was special treatment that was meted out. I mean, I think we would be kidding ourselves if we told ourselves that this is how it's normally done. When somebody is, when the court has instructed that somebody be incarcerated, that there's a whole lot of negotiation, and all that happens. I think it's because it was President Zuma, because he was a former head of state, and because he was really being quite adamant about not going to jail. And, and because, as Diwa said, the populism and the supporter base that he had, and we saw that in Nkandla on Sunday. And so there was a need for the government and the police to tread carefully, because this wasn't an ordinary prisoner. This could have erupted into a really difficult situation of violence, of people dying. And so to that extent, you can understand why the police took some of the actions that they did, why they waited, why they tried to negotiate, because the the other side of the coin would have been really quite disastrous. And, they did not want to go there again. They wanted this to be peaceful. They wanted this to, happen in a way that nobody was harmed. But again, as I said, you saw right up to the end that the reluctance of President Zuma and his family and the people around him, and even his foundation, to accept the ruling of the Constitutional Court, that, this was going to happen. And we have to remember that this is a contempt of court charge. We haven't even gotten to the meat of, why he was supposed to appear before the Zondo Commission. So, we have a long road ahead of us. And even though this is definitely a positive in the sense of the upholding of the Constitution and, the rule of law, Thabo, we still have a long way to go. And I think, this is why, as Amnesty, we call for restraint and we call for people to remain calm, because, the road ahead for President Zuma will probably be even more rocky than this is, given what we've been hearing in the Zondo Commission.
And Dewa, how do we navigate this process now, given that the police did not act on Sunday when they were supposed to act to avoid bloodshed, as the police say, but that when we see those arrests happening, we're not found or caught in a situation where it looks like police are making exceptional arrests. People are being targeted, so to speak, because that's a language that sometimes then emerges and crops up.
Well, Thabo, I think broadly, and at the end of the day, in the final analysis, it was a victory for the rule of law, given the type of person that the courts and the police were dealing with. And of course, in terms of the Constitutional Court order, the deadline by which the police were supposed to have arrested and brought former President Zuma into custody had not expired. So yes, there was a bit of gentleness and giving space to former President Zuma to vent, and also maybe looking at the tactical aspects that could be there, the diplomacy, the negotiations that would not normally apply. But at the end of the day, the police minister and the commissioner of police did not violate the court order that was on them to say by midnight Wednesday, former President Zuma should be in custody. And so we need to accept that and to say, in a way, this shows that South Africa is going in the right direction in terms of institutions. But if there are concerns about failings of the system here and there, these will be addressed within the scope of, reviews in terms of how this particular case was handled. But broadly, it ended in a way that, from a broader human rights point of view, was much better than we had otherwise feared when we saw people vowing that President Zuma would not go to jail, there would be bloodshed, and people would die. And that really had been a scary proposition, especially when you look at the recent history of what happened in Marikana. So when you sort of compare those two and where we are now, this would really be a better space, although lessons can be learned to going forward about what can be done better. And we now have a precedent. This is the first time that a former president has been jailed in South Africa. So we also need to put that into the broader context.
Right, let's hear what they are saying tonight on WhatsApp, our viewers who have been weighing in on the conversation. Lungile in Mthatha saying, I believe that it's good that our judiciary is setting an example with this matter and that no one is above the law. It's high time people face repercussions of their actions. Albrecht in Camps Bay. It is rather unfortunate that Msholozi didn't receive good legal advice from the first legal team. Dali was trying to rescue a bad situation, and unfortunately it was too late. Some of the views tonight of the developments so far. Let me thank you both for coming through tonight. Southern African Director with the Africa Division of Human Rights Watch, Dale Mavinga, as well as the Executive Director at Amnesty International South Africa, Shamila Mohammed. We appreciate your time and thank you for engaging tonight on WhatsApp. When we